1, 2, 1, 2. Good morning. Good morning. How's everyone doing? All right. One of you is doing well. How you doing? Welcome to the free state of Florida. I'm sorry about the weather. Very sorry about the weather. But how many people are going back to New York and New Jersey? Show of hands after this. A few of you. I'm sorry. You're welcome to Florida anytime. My name's Emmett Reed. I'm the CEO of the Florida Healthcare Association, and we represent 605 of the 700 nursing homes in Florida. We will get to 700 one day, but we represent most of the nursing homes in Florida as well as ALFs. And it's my honor today to introduce our speaker. Our speaker today is Clif Porter. Clif he's got a fancy title, but Clif's the man. I mean, that's the real title. He is the chief lobbyist. He is the head guy. He is in the room where it happens. If you've seen Hamilton, Clif is the guy that has been our advocate on a national level for the American Healthcare Association, which represents 14,000 facilities between SNFs and ALFs. Clif's been there for many years, but he earned his way to the top, in my opinion. Clif started out as an administrator in training back, I think, in 1989. And through the progression of years, he became an administrator for many years, and ultimately a regional director in a very large urban market. After that, he earned another great position as the chief lobbyist, head of government relations for HCR Manor Care. Did a great job, and that's actually when I met Clif. I started in 2009 as the CEO of Florida Healthcare Association 14 years ago, on February 9th, actually. And Clif was on my board. And so I got to work very closely with Clif and see how he operates, understand his mind, and I will tell you that as a member, you couldn't have a better member and a better advocate for the association. Clif taught us things like, and especially if you're new to the business, the importance of a strong association and the importance of unity in the association. We're not always going to agree. We're not always going to win, but we better win more times than we lose. But we better always stay together because lawmakers love to divide and conquer. That's what they do, and Clif taught me that. Clif taught all of us that. Clif, every success that, when did you start at American Healthcare? I forgot the date. 10 years ago. 2013, Clif started at the American Healthcare Association. Every big victory, he's been a major part of. But the biggest, and I think we could all agree, biggest victory that Clif was so key to was the billions of dollars secured during COVID-19. I think you give Clif a round of applause for that. The work that he did, they called the American Healthcare Association, and I hope you tell that story. They called Clif when they said, how much money do you need? How can we help? So, and I won't steal your thunder there. So Clif is a graduate of Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU, and it's a little known fact that he is now getting his Master's of Business in the free state of Florida at the best university in Florida, Florida State University. He's working on that online. Would you please welcome your guest speaker, Clif Porter.
All right, good morning. Thank you. Hope everybody's well. And it's my honor and pleasure and privilege to be here today. I want to thank Emmett for the generous introduction this morning. And I got a buddy of mine that I grew up with. I've known since I was 5. He's like my best friend in the world. And, you know, he's one of those guys, you know, I go to 4 times a year just to sit down with, and we chop it up. And we met in first grade. And there was this little girl in front of us. Her name was Yvette Street. I'll never forget her. Absolutely not dead gorgeous. And him and I sat behind her, and we hardly could talk to each other because we were so distracted by this little girl and her pigtails and how beautiful she was. And we're still the best of friends. But he kind of talked to me, and he said, Clif, you've done a lot, but you got a whole lot of people fooled, man. I said, I know. I got them all fooled. They're all fooled because he knows the real me. But, again, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I want to thank Hirsch, and I want to thank all of the folks here at eCap for, again, doing what I consider to be one of the premier events in all of long-term care, and it's absolutely amazing. So I always love to be here and appreciate the invitation. I'm going to talk to you today, and if you know me, I'm going to do it in my way, which is I'm plain spoken. I can be fancy. You know, I've learned to be able to translate in whatever environment that I'm in. But if you really get to know me, I'm a pretty casual kind of dude. I use terms like dude, and I'm kind of chill. So you're going to get a little piece of that of me today because I feel like we're family to some degree. And obviously, I want to be here to give you as much information as I possibly can. We're going to talk about State of the Union, but I'm going to talk about a quick read to start and some of the lessons that I've learned during COVID. And then we're just going to talk mainly about the sector, where we are. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of my experience, and Emmett shared a lot of my career. But one thing I will tell you is that, you know, there's nothing new under the sun. And I'm just convinced that this world rotates, as does time. And if you're smart, and if you remember, and you take notes, you can always be prepared for the future because it kind of comes back around. Looks a little different, but it's usually the same kind of challenges. So I want to try to give some insights on hopefully how we can remain prepared to not only be successful, but ultimately prosper in the future. And I'm really excited about where we are. Now, it's hard to say with all that's been going on. I've never seen a crisis like we experienced the last 2.5, 3 years in my life, and I know many of you have not either. I've been in the business for 33 years. I started in 1989 as an AIT. Business was different then, but in many ways very similar. The challenges were different then, but in many ways very similar. But I will say this, the most extensive crisis I'd ever gone through was a 2-week, 4-foot ice storm in Richmond, Virginia, when I was running a building, and I had to live there for 2.5 weeks. And we were hit with the pandemic, and folks had to live in their buildings for 2.5 years. So to me, it's unimaginable what all of you have survived and experienced over these last couple of years. But most importantly, not only have we survived, but I feel like we're in a position to thrive. All right, that said, there we go. I got a book a long time ago. Maybe I was in my 20s. I had a mentor. He always challenged me, read a book. What are you reading? What are you reading? What are you reading? What are you reading? So I just started basically saying, okay, I'm going to start reading. So there's a book by a guy named Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe is the first president of Temple University. And Russell Crowe wrote a book called Acres of Diamonds. And I don't know if you're familiar with the book. It's a classic. It's a business classic, but it's one of these books that really deals with optimism, particularly when you're in the midst of crisis. And it says that, my favorite quote is, your diamonds aren't in far distant mountains or in yonder seas. They are in your own backyard if you dig. If you dig. And really the theme of this is, in my estimation, that we've been through so much. I call it a tectonic, almost like an environmental event with COVID. There's no other way to describe it. And I think, as with any tectonic environmental event, be it a tsunami, there's sort of this washing away, and then ultimately you can get wrapped up in the disaster that it is, or you can actually look around and say, man, there are actually some real opportunities here in this new world. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. When I was running a nursing home, and I still think it applies today, I had something that I had dubbed the 4 C's of running a successful facility. And I remember talking to my team, and I said, okay, this is a stool. Our building's a stool. And if we can manage our costs, manage our caring, manage our census, and collect our cash, we'll have a great business. So the caring part is really about regulatory compliance, but most importantly, customer service, making sure that that's first. Obviously, from there, census usually follows. If we can be disciplined in our cost control and ultimately collect the money that we're billing for, you can have a successful facility and ultimately prosper. That hasn't changed, but I think when it comes to recovery, I sort of think of things through the same lens. I'm going to talk to you about COVID. I'm going to talk to you about caring. I'm going to talk to you about census. I'm going to talk about cost. I'm going to talk about all 4 of those components within the context of recovery, not only where we are, but ultimately where we're going and where I think the opportunities ultimately exist for us. Let's talk about COVID quickly. This is some data. Long story short is things are a lot better from the perspective of mortality. That, obviously was something that I cried a lot about. I'm not going to say it any different than, if you, I will write a book one day, I promise, about COVID. But in 2020, in those early days and months, it was crystal clear that our government and the world did not know what to do. And that's a scary, scary thing as an adult when you don't know what to do. The folks that are supposed to be taking care of us, taking care of business, taking care of the world, don't know what to do. Do you remember spraying boxes when they came into your facilities to ensure that COVID didn't get on you through a box? I mean, you think about how backwards that was as it pertains to the real science of the actual virus now. It's almost laughable, but that's what we were doing. We were washing our hands like crazy. We were using normal universal precautions, and it had everything to do with population spread. It was community spread. That's how the disease basically, ravaged our sector. We started to put those pieces together because smaller facilities didn't have a lot of COVID, and giant ones had tons of it. And then we were able to sort of assess to say, okay, well, the less traffic that's coming in and out, the less likelihood folks are getting COVID. And then the second discovery, as you know, was what I will call ultimately asymptomatic spread. We didn't know. We're checking temperatures, and people made a lot of money on these infrared temperature deals. But in reality, it had nothing to do with whether or not COVID was going to spread. By that time, it's too late. You're spreading it. You don't even know it. You're healthy. Some people are asymptomatic completely. They've got it, don't know it, and spread it like crazy. All of those factors, again, are what we know now looking back. But the reality is, looking forward, we have a much clearer view. So we've got mortality under control. We're going through these different phases of new variants of virus. One thing I've learned through this process is any virus gets weaker over time in its next iteration. It sort of dilutes itself, or less deadly over time. And the next version maybe, may spread quicker, but it's less impactful. So we're seeing these sort of peaks and troughs as it relates to infections, but overall, I think that the story of the COVID pandemic is largely behind us. We still got to remain vigilant, but largely this is behind us. When we look at up-to-date vaccination rates, we're continuing to improve. And when we say up-to-date, we're including the BA.5. I want to encourage, forget the politics of it all. At the end of the day, I'm just a believer that if you got a 90-year-old and they're willing to take a vaccine, they're vulnerable enough that they should get one. It's just good sense. I want to make sure every precaution is given to our patients, mainly because they're the most vulnerable. And I think we need to continue to do that until we figure out what the ideal is. But at the end of the day, the vaccines work. At the end of the day, we know that our patients benefited from receiving the vaccines, and ultimately mortality as well as infection rates are exemplary of exactly that fact. So we're on our way. We're continuing to improve even with the BA.5. We're a lot higher when you exclude the BA.5, but that's including every round of vaccine available. Again, I want to remind everybody the PHE is over May 11th. Now, everybody can look at me and say, well, Cliff, we need it longer. I want it longer. But, dude, it's been going on for 3 years. And the PHE is going to end. It's not going to be an emergency at some point, and that's actually a good thing when you think about it holistically. But with that, the Medicaid add-ons that states have received will continue because that got delinked by Congress in a recent bill, so it's not necessarily totally concurrent with the PHE, but the 3-day stay waiver will end May 11th. I'm going to say it again. The 3-day stay will end on May 11th. I'm going to say it one more time. The 3-day stay waiver will end on May 11th. Now, we are working. We did find out from some counsel that it's possible to delink meaning that they can grant a waiver separate from the PHE to extend the 3-day stay. We're going to try that. I'm not optimistic, but we're going to try. Mainly because I think, and the argument at least I'm going to make is that when you look at hospital capacity around the country, it's very, very strained. And you go into certain markets, and we've got situations where the hospitals are packed to the gills and have folks in beds in ERs. And alleviating that right now would complicate that capacity issue all the more. So we're going to work on it, but I'm going to set expectations. It's May 11th. You need to prepare your operations for that. And if we're successful, then great. You're in a good spot. If we're not, you're ready. So, caring. Look, guys and ladies, this is the most important thing that we do. You know, I'm going to talk a little bit about credibility, and I've been through this in our sector. And I'll talk a little bit about when I started in the sector and some of the stuff I had to read and sort of where we are and hopefully where we're going. But I've got to represent you. Your job is to make that easy for me. Say it again. I got to go to D.C. and I have to represent you. Your job is to make that as easy for me as you possibly can. And that starts from a public policy perspective of me talking about taking care of old, vulnerable, poor people. And if I'm not in that room and I can't credibly tell a quality story, I have no credibility. And the next disaster that comes, thank God Emmett talked about it, we had enough credibility that they called me at 11:30 at night when they had $150 billion to distribute. And they said, Clif, I understand you're the guy to tell us how to distribute this most efficiently. We're going to get it out the door tomorrow morning. You don't get that call unless you have credibility. And that credibility isn't mine, it's yours. You earn the credibility. But if we don't have credibility on caring, forget it. It's a wrap, it's over, and we will be massacred in the public policy space. We need to accept that, and we have to understand that it has to be at the forefront of what we do, and it has to be something that we think about every single moment of every single day. So with that, a couple of things are intuitive. When we look at our quality metrics, most of them are worse. Understandably so. We've been through a pandemic. Stuff got worse. Some stuff got better. When we look at mobility in our facilities as it relates to our patients has actually improved pre-pandemic. I've got slides. I ended up taking them out. But if you look at each of these individual curves, you'll see sort of a normal line. You'll see the pandemic, which dropped performance. And then you'll more or less see us climbing back as we climbed out of the pandemic. Not unlike the census graphs that I'm going to show you shortly. So you're going to see that. And it's sort of a corollary, normal COVID climb. In the areas where we're worse, the climb is not quite back to where we were pre-COVID, okay? So what that essentially means is this. All of us in this room can logically understand this, logically process it, logically have an explanation and kind of keep our heads down and continue to work to improve quality. The 25-year-old on Capitol Hill with their PhD in health policy say care sucks, it's worse, and it's your fault because you all are greedy, meaning me. That's what they're talking to. Your industry's greedy, and you're taking advantage of grandma. That's what they see. It's the worst. This is worse. So I got to explain it. I got to get them to understand it. We got to get them in our centers. We got to get them sort of socialized to what the message is, and that's where you can help. But the reality is, I got to defend this. And as logical as the realities of this situation is, the reality is a novice and an amateur or not an expert, they don't get it. They just look at the numbers and say it's worse. So we got work to do. This is the piece I look at and worries me more than anything. Folks, the federal government has a record of your staffing. They know. You submit the data. They know. Guess what? When you look at this, and again, we recognize that we've had an exodus of workers. I use the term, and I say it very, very realistically to policymakers. Our caregivers went through PTSD. It was war. It was war. And you can criticize us all you want, but the whole country was a mess. And if you think that when you have a pandemic that hits, the eye of the storm hits our sector specifically, and there's not going to be damage, you're outside of your mind. So I have to remind them of this all the time. And I say it kind of just like that. I don't say outside your mind. I'm talking like I normally talk to you. I'm a lot more professional when I'm talking to the policymakers. But here's the reality. We saw staffing go up. We had the pandemic, it dropped, and it's basically remained flat. Here's what's going to happen. And I'm encouraging you all to think about this. They're looking at transactions. They're looking at COVID, and they're looking at staffing. That's what they're doing. Now, we've not had a consequence or a response from that yet. But if there's a noticeable drop pre-transaction, post-transaction, once COVID is normalized, you got to give me ammo to tell that story, right? There's a story that I have to tell to explain that. And granted, you know, there's some situations where based on the patients you take care of, you don't need as much staff. I understand that. And again, I can translate that in a policy world. But do not forget they got the data. And there is, based on my 33 years of experience and kind of trips around the sun, there's always sort of a periodic reckoning that happens in our space. I've been through 3 reckonings in and it's usually about every decade there's a reckoning of some sort. And I'll explain that later. But this one is one that we really have to be mindful of. Again, we talked about, talked about that already. This here is nurse agency use. This is a hard, you know, when I was an administrator, you didn't use agency. And if you did, it was kind of like a scarlet letter. If you go into a building, you better get rid of the agency because it says a lot, right, about what you're doing. You know, under normal circumstances, can I develop and maintain my own team or not, right? And why would I want to have, you're going to hear my bias here. So if you own an agency, you own it to staff your own building. I get it. I'm not here to be critical. I'm simply saying that your own staff is always better than temporary staff. It's just the way it is. We know this, right? So the goal ought to be to lower this number and ultimately hire and retain and train your own people, because the longer that nursing assistant is taking care of the same group of people, the better the care is going to get. I always say when people start talking about minimum staffing measures, Clif Porter always says, look, when I walked in the door to ACA 10 years ago, I was a hell of a lot less efficient than I am today. I can do more now with less, mainly because I'm experienced and I understand it better. And that applies to a nursing assistant as well. I've been a nursing assistant. I walked the halls with folks. That snowstorm for 2.5 weeks, I was a nursing assistant. It's been a while, but I had to suit up, put a back belt on, and take some patients. I'll never forget the lead aide. She told me when she put, I couldn't even get the belt on right. She was like, oh God. You know, and she said, I want you to take this patient. I said, you tell me what to do. You are the boss. And she told me what to do. And she said, I'm giving you the easiest patients. And I'm glad she did. And that's a whole nother story, but it's a great one in the book. But the point is, you do what you have to do to stay out of agency. And unfortunately, the issue is getting worse. Caring. We got a long way to go, and I want to say this, and I'm going to say it quickly. When I talk about sort of this big cycle, there is going to be a regulatory reckoning. What does that mean? That means that right now, they don't even have enough people to survey us. I've run nursing homes. I've run good ones. I'm proud of the record I had as an operator. Proud. But guess what? I know on any weekend, something was happening and something's in that chart I'm not going to like that I don't know about. And that was being a good operator. I knew. I said, oh, God, you know, what's going on this weekend? What's the staffing like? And you know in your brain where your vulnerabilities are. And you know anybody that's run a building for any length of time knows that in those records, there's always a deficiency. When they get fully staffed again, they're going to dig. And they're going to do so with some fervor and some level of vigor. We just got to know that. And this happens every 10 years. You just got to understand it's just a part of the cycle of those that are newer to the business. We got to be ready. We got to be ready for that. We got to be ready to explain why we do what we do, and more importantly, be in a position that we have a good quality story to tell. I am worried that surveyors will come in and they will look at the window when COVID was occurring and we were in the thick of it, and guess what? Our charts are filled with deficiencies. A bomb went off. That's the way I describe it. If a nuclear bomb goes off, do you think I'm checking, all the I's and dotting all the T's? No, I'm trying to figure out how to survive. But that switch is going to come on, and we got to be ready. We got to be ready. So I want to flag for you, get your quality house in order now. Because if we're in a situation where I have to go to Washington, D.C., and we have a bunch of IJs and newspaper stories and all kinds of other things going on, guess what? That damages our credibility as a whole. And when you say I need more resources, I need more of this, I need more of that, I can't tell that story. They look at me and laugh me out the halls of Congress. Get out of here. Why don't you take care of the patients with the money you got? I mean, that is kind of how it works. I mean, I'm simplifying it, but it is kind of how it works. So we got to be ready. This is a great slide. Census is recovering. Anecdotally, around the country, we're seeing tremendous improvement. Here in the state of Florida, we're doing fantastic on the census front. Obviously, that correlates with staff. I think the staffing situation is slowly and incrementally improving as it relates particularly to direct care staff. So I think we're going to be back and beyond where we were before. And I think that's one of the diamonds that I talked about that if we dig for, we'll find. We always had a need for our services. We always knew that the demographics would ultimately lead to more demand for our services. COVID accelerated that demand. And it also accelerated society's recognition that they need us. So all of that is a very positive thing. If we can maintain our credibility through that, I think the future is really, really bright. Okay? But if we take a short view of this and we don't think about what I consider to be the basics, and we're not focused on caring for people, compliance, customer service, we're going to have problems. Okay? So while this number continues to improve, it's a great indicator of our health overall. I think that has nowhere to go but north and fast, and I think we'll continue to see growth. But we're almost to pre-pandemic levels, and that's good news. This is a great heat graph, I call it. So this gives you an idea of where occupancy is by state. And the red is 5% or more below the pre-pandemic levels. So a lot of facilities are still greater than 5% below pre-pandemic levels. But when you look at other aspects, you can look at the western half of the country. They're doing pretty well in the west. You got the green, which means they're doing actually better than they were pre-pandemic. So you can look in the south as sort of being the most challenged. You look at the west as being the best. And then kind of everybody in between. Now, I will say all of those reds don't mean worse as it relates to not improving. All of them are improving. So everybody's census is getting better. But those red blocks are not essentially within 5% of pre-pandemic conditions. They could be, and I'm sure more and more of those will flip to neutral and green. But the reality is we're continuing to see improvement. And as you can see, there's some states that are just blowing it out the water and are far beyond where they were before. So that's good news. Workforce, 210,000 less jobs. I don't need to spend a whole lot of time on this other than to say we're telling the story over and over again as it relates to the defense on a minimum staffing mandate. I'm going to talk about that at length, and I'm going to do everything I can not to use bad words when I talk about it. All right? Here's what we're doing. Let me be clear. We got a divided Congress. Not a lot's going to happen. All right, just start there. You got divided Congress. Everybody's fighting. Not a lot happens, okay? So we got to start there. But where we can work things that are bipartisan and no cost, you got a shot. So our CNA lockout bill, I think, really has a viable chance as Congress. What is that? You get an IJ, $10,000. I forget what the highest fine is now. It escalates every year. But whatever that number is, you get that fine. Your CNA program that you have at your nursing home is suspended for 2 years. I call it the 2-year sentence for jaywalking. I jaywalk, 2 years. Lock me up, take me away. Doesn't matter what it is. My hot water temps were off. Oh, we're fining you IJ 10. What's that got to do with me doing a CNA training program? Nothing. 2 years. Lock me up, throw away the key for 2 years. Can't see we're gonna fix that. And we've got a bipartisan support to do that. So you can actually have some control of your destiny and actually develop and grow your own staff by training them to be nursing assistants, to direct caregivers. TNA Workforce Bill, we're doing the same thing. We're working on extending that program. That was a lifeline as a waiver program for us. We're optimistic that we can actually pass that and actually make that a piece of the career ladder, ultimately leading to certification. Got a lot of co-sponsors there, and we're really excited about the prospects on that. So while that doesn't solve our problem, it does give us some control. We need some control of our destiny, and that's kind of what I've been telling members of Congress. You're talking about creating a staffing. Here I go. You're creating a staffing mandate. We don't have enough people, and then you take away the tools that I need to grow folks for myself, and you call that good policy. I don't think so. That's insanity, and I'm saying that. I'm being a little bit more like myself when I talk about this issue, because when you look at the entire economy, everybody's looking for workers. Everybody. This is not unique to long-term care. Our situation is 10x worse, and what do you want to do? You want to create a mandate on the worst, most starved population of professional category in America, and you want to make it worse. That is stupid, and I've said that. This is stupid. And they looked at me like, the CMS administrator laughed. She smiled when I said that. I said, come on. Come on. I'm looking at all of you. Come on. And she laughed. She couldn't help but smile when I said that. She didn't change her mind, but she at least thought I was humorous. There are a couple other things that I call fringe work we're doing. We're doing some work on nurse scholarships and loan repayment. Essentially, we want to try to create a scenario where nurses can get into the field and ultimately get their loans repaid. We got some appropriation stuff we're doing as it relates to getting additional RNs and making sure that we can also get long-term care included. It's a lot going on, but again, these are what I call nibbling at the fringe kind of things. A lot of work going on with immigration. I want to, I won't get in a lot to that. Not a lot's going to happen on this front, but I am optimistic that there is a bill that maybe could increase the immigration caps and ultimately carry over visas that were lost during COVID, and we can use those for healthcare workers and ultimately bring in more workers from outside of the country. So that's a goal. Yes, sir.
CNA lockout, that's a legislative?
Yes. Yes.
Introduced as a law?
It is the law. It is the law. It is a statute. The question Moshe had was about the CNA lockout, and the law is in statute, if you have a fine of X, your CNA program is suspended for 2 years. So that's not even a reg, that's a law. So we have to change the law to get that done. Absolutely. Long and short, no workers, no census. We got to deal with both. Cost, we just published, you getting a first look. It's public, but we got a CLA study that we did. I'm going to go through it. We'll make sure you have access to it if you're a member. But it's a staffing mandate analysis. It's going to cost $11.3 billion a year to staff at a 4.1 nationwide. Where in the world is the money going to come from? One. And if you gave me $11.3 billion a year, where in the world are the staff going to come from? You tell me. They can't tell me. But that's what I'm saying. And the reality is we're showing them this data. This is a third-party analysis that got completed that shows that this will be a significant cost to implement. Second, these are the different scenarios based on how they set the minimum. So if they set it at a 4.1, it's 11.3. And then if you go to scenario 3, it's about a $4 billion cost a year. Either way, something the government's not willing to pay, I promise you. So the reality is, regardless of the scenario, all of them are unsustainable. Let's talk about the health of the sector. If you look at the sector overall and our performance in 2022, and this is projected, we're at a negative 6.5% margin. Our occupancy is running 74%, and then we got about 47% of our patients are in facilities that what we would call at risk based on margins and census to potentially close. So we're using this information to kind of explain when they think we're making a killing, which some buildings are, some are dying and closing. So it's the best of times, the worst of times, the average is this, and therefore we have to continue to resource our sector. This is 2023 estimation. Obviously the margins got better as census has improved, occupancy has improved, and then those patients at risk are less. So we think 2023 will be a better story to tell, but the reality is 0.6% margin is not sustainable to run any business. This gives you an idea quickly of where wages have gone up, up, up. FTE trends, again, this is a concerning number. This is very difficult to defend, particularly if it is structural. We got to make sure that we start making sure that we have robust staffing levels. But clearly, during the pandemic, staffing went down. Agency went up. Inflation, 9.1%, and it's a peak in 2022. Post-COVID average, 6%. Pre-COVID, we were at about a 3.5% clip. We've got an inflationary economy. All right, I'm going to close. Guess who that dude is? That would be me. $50 pounds ago. I mean, that man had a hairline back in those days. Good God Almighty, I miss that hair, man. I love that hair. But that lady I'm dancing with, this was the first day of my AIT program, National Nursing Home Week, 1989. My preceptor said, you're going to go on activities for your first rotation of your AIT. I sit down next to this lady, and I'll try not to cry. But we talk. I'm in Lynchburg, Virginia, of all places, backwoods country. I'm sitting next to her, and we're just talking. I said, well, man, what's your name? And she said, my name is Clifton Apperson. I said, Clifton? That's my name. My name is Clifton. I've never met a lady named Clifton. I said, how'd you get the name? She said, a frustrated father of 9 girls named Clifton. I mean, she had the best wit, smelled of powder and a hint of urine. That's what I would describe it. Just kind of, that was what I remember. But this guy comes and plays a banjo, and we had this beautiful conversation, and she grabs my hand and says, let's dance. And that's us dancing. Miss Apperson was 90 years old then. She's long gone from this world, but she forever impacted my life. And as you can see, we're looking at each other in the eyeballs. And I resolved that this is really what it's all about. It's about making sure that she has dignity, that she has quality, and that ultimately she ends her life in a manner she's worthy of. And I resolved at that point in time that this was going to be my life's work. What business can you be in where you can serve other people, you can honor your parents? That's the way I always viewed it. I've been young, one day I'll be old, right? What can I do to prepare the world to take better care of older people? Because one day I'm going to benefit from that, hopefully. But I will always love and remember Miss Clifton Apperson. These are the things that keep me up. Workforce. Where are they going to come from? We're doing everything we can. Quality. We have to take care of business on quality. Period. End of story. Enforcement we talked about. And then transition and experience. And I'm just being frank with everyone. We've had a lot of transactions in recent years, more transactions than in my 33 years of professional life. That's a good thing. Okay? So no one's knocking that. But the reality is, I know, we all know, anytime there's transition, you're handing off a baton. And when you hand off the baton, there's a risk that something gets missed in the transition. That's in any organizational transition. So I always worry a little bit about that. And I worry about ensuring that we have a credible voice, right? The most important thing you can give me is credibility. I want to be able to tell the story of what you do, of how you took care of Clifton Apperson, of what her life was like, of your staff, of your teams, of what we're doing in that local community, how patients are getting better, what kind of customer service scores you have, what kind of QMs you have. I want to be able to tell that story. And if I can tell that story effectively and have good information, guess what? I can be in a position where I have credibility and ultimately get you the resources you need to make your business work. If I don't, I'm not getting it. I don't care how good I am, guys. It won't be sustainable. And that applies to every state association in the country. You got to give your state execs a product that they can actually work with. You have to. And if we have that story, I tell you, we're going to be successful. Public policy, quickly, talked about credibility. Number one priority is the staffing mandate, workforce issues, regulatory relief. Quality we talked about being a whole new world, talked about care. Let me tell you how you can help. Updated minimum staffing rule, and then I'll open it up for a few questions. This is, look, night and day, I'm going to fight this thing. And if anybody knows me, I'm a rumbler. I like to fight a little bit. I actually do. This is a fight. This is an existential fight. And our opponents and our foes are saying that we've had a staffing crisis way before COVID. And none of this has anything to do with COVID, but has everything to do with you rich people who are taking all the money out of care, putting it into your pockets, keeping it away from your staff, and using it to buy this and buy that, and hiding it in all these. And this is all the stuff they talk about. You're hiding your money. Garbage. It's just garbage, right? It's garbage. Everybody here in this room has a right to have 5 different businesses if they want. If you want to have a pharmacy, it makes sense to have a pharmacy if you got nursing. Who doesn't create vertical integration in running a business? Everybody does that. Who cares? I mean, give me a break. Why wouldn't you do that? Why would that not improve quality? That doesn't make any sense. But they want to frame this for one reason and one reason only. They want to put you out of business. And they want all of those resources to go to home care. Because in their twisted, dumb mind, they think that we can care for people at home and everybody would just want to be home. And I said, that doesn't work. I said, when grandma poops on somebody's Persian rug, they're getting out, I promise you. It's like, we need to take care of mom somewhere else. We're in a different world. It's a different society that we're in today. This is not the society my dad grew up in, where 4 generations lived in a row house in Washington, D.C., and everybody took care of each other. The whole economy is different. Women had much fewer work choices in those days, so lots of women stayed home. Men worked. It was a whole different model. It was just different. That doesn't exist anymore, right? So thinking that we're going to be able to just go poof and have enough staff to meet a mandate is ridiculous. So Senator Casey, Zach's here. He's as mad as I am. I'm trying to keep Zach from going off. He's ready to, he's irritated with Casey as I am. But he's leading an effort, a letter to support what the administration is trying to do. And Senator Wyden, who's chair of finance, feels the obligation to join him. So they're circulating a letter, and we issued a letter. Senator Tester, who actually led a letter that was supportive of our position. We had 4 additional Democrats on the letter and 7 Republicans, bipartisan letter supporting our professional position. They felt the need to counter it. So this letter isn't out yet, but it's coming, and they're trying to get senators to sign. Because CMS is feeling the pressure from us that if they put a mandate, they're hearing from you. So they're getting nervous. So they're asking for cover. These guys are trying to give it to them. I want to make that letter as anemic as we possibly can. I want as many Democrat senators not to sign on that thing as possible. They're aiming for the Aging Committee and the Finance Committee. That's who they want to sign on, and I'll tell you what you can do. I need you to contact the people I'm going to show you in a minute, and you've got these slides, and ask them not to sign the letter. It's coming. Don't sign it. Here's why. 191,000 nurses aren't going to magically appear, $11 billion to fund it. We need to get the rule, and we need to deal with it when the time comes. These are the people. If you're in Connecticut, Ohio, Washington State, Maryland, Delaware, looks like Cortez Mastro's with us, so I'd scratch her. Fetterman, PA. Casey, PA. Gillibrand, New York. Mark Kelly, I think he's with us in Arizona, so you can kind of scratch him. Menendez, Rosen, I think Rosen's with us too of late. Scratch her. Mark Warner's with us, you can scratch him. Warnock, I think he's going to be with us too. We're making this list smaller by the day. But these are the folks that need to hear from you loud and clear that do not sign the letter, okay? If none of them sign that letter, they're going to have a letter with 2-3 senators on it. Ours is going to have 7, and they're going to be in a real sticky wicket. And I want them to have some stress, okay? You can help us do that by making these calls. You got the info. Those are the numbers. Just call. You got the script. It's easy. All right? We're trying to shape the rule. We still have the letter campaign where we're submitting emails to every senator, which you all are doing. I think we're up to 1,400 as of yesterday. Goes 3,000 by the end of the month. We'll blow that out the water. That's creating pressure as well. So you got all. So the strategy is this: bam, 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 bam. It's not even a straight jab. It's not a straight jab. We're going all. I'm gonna jab them 3 times, and then we hit them with a tester uppercut, and then we're gonna start jabbing to the kidneys. I mean, they're not gonna know what's coming, but we're gonna keep it coming. It just needs to keep on every angle we can, to where they're like, oh God, stop, right? That's the play. But if you don't get engaged, we lose. So don't look at me. I'm blunt. I'm fine. I'm good. Life's good. But I'm honest. I don't win if you don't help. If you help, we all win. We win or we don't together. So we can't point fingers that Clif wasn't doing his job. No, I'm telling you what I need your help with. If you don't do it, look at yourself. Don't look at me. I'm working this 24 hours, 7 days a week, weekends. Trust me. All I'm asking you to do is get on the phone and call these people. I'm not asking for a lot. That's where I need your help. The ambassador group has a booth. JJ's here. JJ has been a huge help to us. Let me say, I can't say enough about the ability to coordinate with JJ and Melissa. I can plug in with them, and it's like a light switch. Bam! I mean, it's so awesome. It makes my life so much easier. Just go bam, and just light up a group of people, and I can light up your entire community. I was meeting with folks yesterday. One brother came to me, he said, yo, I know Hakeem Jeffries, and then he tells me his cell phone number. Now, if you know me, that's like the royal grail, the holy grail of relationship. Like, if you got the cell phone number, it's like your girl. I'm going to meet the girl. What do? You try to get her phone number. If you don't have her phone number, she ain't your girl, right? If I get her phone number, I'm good. Same thing applies to a legislator. Well, I got a relationship with someone. Do you have a phone number? No. Well, you ain't got no relationship. He's got a relationship. He told me the phone number. JJ remembers it. I forgot. Hopefully he still remembers it. But yeah, he's got the number, right? So we got a guy that's basically that has a personal relationship, supported Hakeem Jeffries from when he was in the State House, first running for State House. They're friends. These are the relationships that matter. We got to have you working on those relationships. So again, I'm grateful for the ambassadors. Continue to work with JJ. If you're not, you need to, because if you're not part of the solution, guess what? You end up being part of the problem. And we got all kinds of stuff to help you do it in a very easy and functional way. All right, I'm done. I got questions. I'm about out of time. Yes, sir. Yeah, good question. So he asked when the staffing study's coming out. We're hearing it's going to be out in March. We're hearing that the data gathering piece is done. It's a cooked book. It's cooked. It's a bunch of hooey. It's another patient gave me that word. Marguerite Brooks, my first nurse at home. She said it was hooey. It's bunch of hooey. And that's exactly what it is. It's hooey. Picking the sample. You ask them if it's a random sample. They can't answer the question. I asked the question. You doing studies at a random sample? Or is this, I mean, Stephen knows this better than I do. Is it a random sample? They don't answer the question. How are you going to do a study and not be a random sample? That's called cheating. It's cheating. But it will come out in March. The rule will be proposed end of April, probably the last Friday of April, early May. We're pushing it now to shape it, to moderate it away from 4.1, one size fits all. Anything that's better than that is a win when they propose it. Then that's where we're starting, and then we're going to start the formal rule comment process, and we're going to beat it to smithereens. We're going to beat it to smithereens. And then from there, if we don't get it where we want it, we sue them, and we win. And we're prepared for every situation. Moshe.
What, did we ever discuss with the federal government about CMPs going towards scholarships for nurses?
Yes, we are working on a bill now to, and we got to do it with Republicans. But yes, so we're working on a bill that essentially will allow us more flexibility to use CMP funds for workforce development purposes. So what that will do is it could be scholarship, it could be anything workforce related. That'll open it up so we can get more people and ultimately support our workforce.
To understand that we're willing to, spend some money if it's necessary, a little bit. There has to be some sort of cost share.
Yeah, absolutely.
They have all our money. They have all our CFPs as well.
Right.
So
That can be used, no question, in a constructive way. I agree. Other questions? Well, yes, sir. Yeah, so no, yes and no, okay? Yes, from the perspective of what good stories we have out there strategically through social media, and we're doing that all over the place. So from the perspective of what improvements we're seeing in the sector from a quality, that's why it's important to measure. That's why I get back to those quality metrics. I can't put, quality is subjective. Measurements and data is not. It's absolutely, so when we have good data, we share it. Public opinion is driven by spending a lot of money, like Got Milk ads as an example. But that's, we're talking, $300 million campaign to move, people to drink real milk versus almond milk. Almond milk's not milk kind of thing. We don't have those kind of resources, so we don't take that necessarily traditional approach. I say this, the more positive stories that you all give us, the greater the ability we have to share it and help improve public opinion. And I'll say this as well, we're doing a lot more work on trying to focus on former patients that are satisfied with our services and telling their story and sharing it versus the New York Times article that's bad and letting that drive the narrative of what we do. The other thing in response to that is it's critical you get folks in your centers. You ought to get your members of Congress in your nursing centers. They need to walk around those buildings and see the kind of patients you take care of. They need to understand the complexity of them. They need to understand they're very sick. They need to understand that nobody else is going to take care of them. Nobody's there to take care of them. Poor people, and I've never been poor, but I've definitely been middle class. But you don't have the capacity to fund taking care of mama anymore. You don't have the capacity to do that. So somebody has to do that, and we're the ones that have to do that. So if they believe and want to help us improve quality care, they got to fund it. But guess what? We got to deliver the product if they're paying for it. So deliver the product. That helps me tell the story. If I can tell a good story, we can win. So, so big campaign, no. Tactical, yes. Okay, yeah. So So, yeah, experiences matter, and we can tell the story about experiences, but due to the fact that we are a government-funded, regulated, and paid-for entity, the number one customer really is the patients we serve and the government that pays us, right? So the importance of data deals with that half of the equation. The importance of experience, again, I think falls back on what you guys do. The more folks that leave happy, they're talking about it. That helps your business, but more importantly, allows us to spotlight as well the positive experience. So we're doing that. You know, when somebody gets to go home, we talk about what percentage of our patients actually go home. Most of our patients go home, right? When they come to us, most of our admissions ultimately go home. We tell the story, but again, it's in a coordinated and targeted way. It's not a grand effort, but open to any ideas for sure. All right, one more question. Yes, sir. Say it one more time.
Are there any synergies with our hospital partners, hospital association, as far as the 3-night rule?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So he asked if there are any synergies with the 3-day stay waiver in hospitals that could be beneficial. Answer is yes. I talk to my colleague all the time from American Hospital Association. You may know that they, for the first time in history, endorsed our TNA bill. They never endorsed anything unrelated to hospitals. They did for the sole purpose that they know that we need staff so they can empty their hospital beds and ultimately be successful. We also had a conversation her and I did yesterday. They're going to weigh in on the mandate, but also the 3-day stay, because in targeted areas of the country, they're over capacity. Eliminating the 3-day stay ultimately creates, absolutely helps them and helps us. So yes. All right, guys, I'm done. Thanks.